Hey, folks, welcome to Phantoms Monsters Radio. So, Minnesota is known as the land of 10,000 lakes, a place of deep forest, northern wetlands, cold rural roads, isolated cabins, old family properties, and vast stretches of wilderness where the modern world seems to thin out. But beneath that familiar image is another Minnesota, a stranger Minnesota. A place where people have reported living trees walking through the marsh, upright canids stalking family for generations, Bigfoot breaking into reinforced structures, hollow human-shaped entities moving through winter trails, antlered figures appearing at old church windows, alien beings entering tents in the dead of night, Owlman encounters accompanied by missing time, and a massive winged humanoids descending over highways. These are not ordinary ghost stories. These are direct eyewitness accounts from people who found themselves confronted by something they just couldn't explain. Now, some of these reports suggest the presence of ancient land spirits. Others point to cryptid predators, interdimensional entities, alien contact, or winged humanoid activity similar to cases reported elsewhere in the Midwest. So tonight we entered the strange, dark, and deeply mysterious world of unexplained Minnesota. Now, the first case begins in northern Minnesota in St. Louis County, in a low, marshy wetland area where upright dead trees stood in the muck. The witness, identified as CJ, was riding with her husband during the day, and as they passed through the wetland, she looked toward the trees and saw something that should not have been possible. One of the trees moved, not swaying in the wind, not shifting from optical illusion. Now, according to CJ, the tree literally walked several steps forward. Now, she described it as approximately 12 foot tall, dark, decayed, and rotting. Several of its branches resembled arms and two legs extended from the bottom. Those legs stepped forward into the thick muck of the wetland. CJ could not identify what kind of tree it was. She was stunned and immediately told her husband that one of the trees had just walked. He had not seen it and apparently did not believe her, so he simply continued driving. But later, after speaking with me, CJ contacted the Ojibwe elder and described what she had witnessed. The elder told her that the Ojibwe word mitig, meaning tree, He described what she had seen as a living tree, a traditional spirit protector of the woods. The elder told CJ that seeing it had been an honor and a gift. He suggested that she return to the location, leaving an offering, possibly part of a meal or some tobacco. And CJ later said she intended to return and tried to photograph the location, but the elder explained that the living tree would probably not appear again in physical form. Still, he advised her to leave the offering regardless. Now, this is a remarkable account because it does not fit the comfortable into the usual category: cryptid, ghost, UFO, or human encounter. There's no chase, no attack, and no threat. Instead, the report feels older. It has a tone of a land-based spirit tradition, something connected to the woods themselves, a being not necessarily intruding into our world, but already part of it. And that's what makes Minnesota the perfect place for such a case to begin. Because once you move north into the wetlands, lakes, old forest, and remote properties, the landscape itself seems to hold memory. And sometimes, according to those who have seen the impossible, that landscape may also be watching. But not every encounter in Minnesota's northern wilderness feels sacred or protected. Some are aggressive, some are predatory, and some appear to involve creatures that have remained on the same land for generations. So for more than 70 years, a remote tract of northern Minnesota wilderness has been setting for repeated encounters with upright walking canids, commonly referred to as Dogman or Lycans. Now, this case is not based on a single sighting. It's a long-term, multi-generational account involving one family property, multiple witnesses, physical evidence, psychological effects, anomalous activity, and anomalous activity, and entities that seem to operate with intelligence, continuity, and intent. Now, the activity began shortly after World War II, when Ron Shell's grandparents purchased land in northern Minnesota and began trapping animals for the Department of Natural Resources. Almost immediately, they discovered disturbances that deeply unsettled them. Trapped animals were mutilated or removed entirely. Steel traps were bent or sprung in ways that suggested dexterity and strength far beyond those of known predators. Carcasses were partially consumed with precision, yet no known animal in the region seemed capable of manipulating the traps in such a way. So one early incident involved what the family believed was a black bear damaging crops and property. Ron's grandmother shot the animal and sent several children to retrieve the body as proof. But when they arrived, there was blood and fur, but no carcass. Instead, they found massive wolf-like tracks that did not correspond to any bear. And after that, Ron's grandfather escalated the armament and frequently removed all traps from the land. At times, he gathered backup from family members, convinced that something dangerous and intelligent was operating in the woods. Now, another pivotal encounter occurred near a cemetery close to the property. Ron's grandmother encountered a tall, upright canine entity leaning casually against a gravestone. Now, she described pointed ears, a long snout, and a bushy tail. The creature stood upright, turned deliberately, and walked into the forest. When someone suggested it may have been a bear, she rejected that explanation. She insisted it was something entirely different. Fast forward to the present day, and Ron Shaw reports near daily interactions on the same land. And according to him, the upright canines appear to be descendants of those his grandparents encountered. He believes there is a family structure among them, including parents, siblings, and offspring. Now, one dominant female, referred to as Allura, appears to function as a matriarch figure. The creatures exhibit behavior suggesting long-term territorial control and familiarity with human routines. Now, investigators affiliated with Crypto Four Corners International documented these encounters in detail. Ron reports that when investigator J.C. Johnson was present, sightings increased dramatically. The upright canids appeared to show particular interest in him, sometimes approaching closer or revealing themselves more openly. On several occasions, Ron reported that the creatures tried to lure his dogs with food, apparently seeking to gain their trust. One highly unusual aspect of these encounters involves the perception of direct mental communication. Ron recounted hearing a voice in his mind offering to teach him a spell about gravity. This type of mind-to-mind impression has also been reported in other upright canine cases collected by researchers such as the late Linda Godfrey. Now, these communications are not described as ordinary sounds heard through the ears. They are described as impressions, thoughts, warnings, or statements that appear directly to the mind. Now, during a field investigation in early September, a group including J.C. Johnson, his son J.D., Ron Shaw, and other witnesses experienced multiple anomalous events. Upon arrival, several individuals independently reported a sudden oppressive shift in the atmosphere as they drove onto the property. And as night fell, JC and another investigator walked toward a clearing, calling out. Observers using night vision saw an approximately 8 to 9 foot tall humanoid figure partially concealed behind a pine tree, watching the men with apparent curiosity. Moments later, additional movement was detected nearby, prompting the group to withdraw. Now, daytime reconnaissance revealed large canine footprints, manipulated forest structures consistent with tool-like use, and an observation point overlooking Ron's home. That evening, while conducting a night patrol with night vision equipment, JD and another witness encountered several anomalies. A normally dry trail was suddenly flooded despite no rainfall. A tall, upright canine figure stood in the moonlight corridor of the trees. Its head was wide, its ears erect, and its body fully upright. Shortly afterwards, something struck the rear of their vehicle with enough force to shake it. The engine briefly failed, and the car appeared to be lifted from behind before power was restored. Now, when the witnesses returned to the house, they discovered that a video camera placed on an outdoor table earlier in the day had vanished without explanation. This echoed previous incidents in which objects disappeared and then reappeared in prominent locations. Now, following the group's departure, a Lakota and Metis spiritual practitioner spent a week on the property. He reported discovering fresh three-toed tracks with unusual heel impressions, heavy scratching on the elevated windows, objects thrown against the house, and multiple animal reactions indicating the presence of something unseen. Now, through visions and spiritual impressions, he concluded that a shape-shifting group with Ojibwe roots was operating in the region, possibly centered near the Red Lake Reservation. Now, that interpretation remains controversial and intensely debated, but it adds another layer to an already complex case. If this were the only one sighting, it might be dismissed as misidentification, but this case involves generations of activity, physical disturbances, tracks, witness testimony, investigator observations, unusual mental impressions, and repeated phenomena tied to the specific location. It suggests not a random animal encounter, but a territory watched, guarded, and perhaps controlled by something that knows the land far better than the people who live on it. And that theme continues into the next case because the deep woods do not only produce reports of dogmen, they also produce Bigfoot encounters. But this next report is unlike the typical roadside sighting or distant silhouette across the trail. This case involves a powerful creature allegedly breaking into a reinforced concrete block structure for a specific purpose. Now, this account came from a witness identified as BR, a licensed personal use medical marijuana grower living in Minnesota. The incident occurred in Carlton County in a forested area near Kettle River. To prevent theft, BR built a secure 10 by 12 foot growing shed on property he owned. The shed was built from reinforced cement blocks. Inside the wall, vertical steel girders were spaced every 6 inches. He also had a heavy steel vault door fitted with a large tempered lock. The structure had heating, humidity control, grow lights, and electrical service wired in from the main grid. In other words, it was not a flimsy shed. It was built to keep people out. And for about a year, the setup functioned without incident. But then one day, BR arrived to notice the steel vault door had been tampered with. There were scratches all around the outside face of the door, and the jamb had been slightly bent away from the cement blocks. It was difficult for him to open the door after unlocking it. He assumed someone had tried to force entry but failed. Now, none of the plants had been disturbed, so BR repaired the door and added reinforcement. Everything seemed normal for about 3 weeks, but then came another attempt. This time, a large hole had been created through the cement wall, and one of the steel girders had been pushed out of its mooring in the concrete floor. Whoever gained access reached into the shed and pulled out several plants. There was snow on the ground, indicating activity around the structure, but BR did not notice ordinary footprints, tool marks, tire tracks, or evidence of equipment that could explain how the breach had been made. BR repaired the wall and decided to camp near the site to catch whoever was interfering with his property. He set up a large tent about 30 yards from the shed and bought enough supplies to stay for a week or more. He also installed outside lighting around the top of the shed. Now, after a few quiet nights, everything seemed normal. He saw a black bear once and an occasional deer. Then one evening around twilight, he heard cracking sounds coming from the direction of the shed. There was still enough light to see movement, though the shed lights had not yet come on. At about 20 yards, BR saw light escaping from the shed through the far wall. Something had breached the structure again. But then he saw it. Stepping away from the shed was an 8 to 9 foot tall Bigfoot carrying at least 6 plants. And as BR watched, the creature placed one of the plant stems in its mouth and stripped off the leaves and buds. It chewed the material as it walked away towards the forest. Now, BR said the Bigfoot looked in his direction for a second, turned, and continued walking away. It glanced back one more time, then moved into the trees. Now, BR also noticed other sounds and movements around him. He was convinced there were several other Bigfoot nearby during the encounter. Now, he described the creature as massive, with a conical head and dark auburn-colored hair. The face had sparse hair, and the features were visible. He said he could see the whites of its eyes, which seemed to glow slightly. The face was ape-like with a large, wide, flat nose. He could clearly see fingernails in one of the creature's large hands. The gait was also unusual. BR said it lifted its feet higher than a human while walking, and he could see the soles of its feet as it moved away. Now, when asked why he did not take a photograph, BR said his phone had been turned off to conserve battery while staying in the forest. And he later began building another grow shed several miles away. He also repaired the original shed and started placing trail cams at the location. He kept one of the stripped stems and hoped to have it tested for saliva or touch DNA. The question raised by this case is unusual. Was the Bigfoot simply attracted to the smell of the plants? Was it consuming them for some psychoactive effect? Or was it using the plants medicinally? Native tradition and field reports have sometimes suggested that Sasquatch-like beings may use plants and herbs. Some investigators have also heard stories of Bigfoot pulling marijuana plants in parts of the Pacific Northwest and Northern California. Whatever the motive, this report suggests planning, strength, persistence, and deliberate targeting. This was not a random animal rummaging through garbage. This was a powerful bipedal creature that allegedly breached a reinforced structure and took specific plants. And if BR's impression was correct, it may have not been alone. From living trees to dogmen to Bigfoot, Minnesota's wilderness accounts already suggest a landscape filled with intelligence. But not all entities in the reports are solid, hairy, or animal-like. Some are more elusive. Some appear only as outlines, and sometimes the first being to notice them is not the human witness at all. Now, this next report comes from Maplewood, Minnesota. The witness, identified as H, lived and worked in the area. And during the winter, he had a bizarre sighting near his home that he could only describe as hollow, but with the outline of a person. So one evening around dusk, H took his dog outside. There was still some sunlight, but it was winter, so there were no leaves on the trees or bushes. His home was near a hiking trail, and he headed out with his dog, a 100-pound Rottweiler. Now, the dog began doing his business, then suddenly stopped dead in his tracks. This was not normal behavior. H said nothing that usually spooked the dog. But now the Rottweiler froze and stared toward the trail. H asked what he was looking at, but at first he saw nothing. The dog refused to move further into the yard. He stood like a pointer, fixed on something H could not see. So H lined himself up behind the dog, looked down the dog's back and across his nose, trying to see what had captured his attention. And for several minutes, he stared into the brush, but then he saw it, a shape, an outline that looked like a human figure. But there was nothing inside it. There was only the outline of a head, shoulders, and arms. Based on the position in the bushes, it appeared to be about 5 foot tall. Now, he said the figure seemed to sense that it had been spotted, and then it moved. It walked deliberately and slowly along the trail before disappearing. When it moved, the dog became jittery and wanted to go back into the house. The animal clearly did not want to remain in the yard, and H nicknamed the entity the Owlman because it reminded him of the invisible character from the Kevin Bacon movie. He said he could see the branches behind it as it moved between them. The figure appeared to have only a black outline. It was about 100 foot away. H heard no sound, and the air was cold and still. Now, what makes this report especially compelling is the dog's behavior. H did not go outside expecting to see something strange. He did not first imagine the figure and then interpret the dog's reaction. Instead, the dog alerted first. The dog froze, stared, and refused to move. Only after aligning himself with the animal's line of sight did H see the hollow, human-shaped outline moving through the brush. This type of report is often referred to as predator-like cloaked entity sightings, something we call glimmerman encounters. In these cases, witnesses described a partially transparent figure, distortion outlines, shimmer, and absence of normal visible form. But in Maplewood, the figure did not shimmer like heat. It was hollow, a person-shaped absence outlined against the winter brush, and it moved as though it knew it had been seen. Now, from a hollow figure near a hiking trail, we move next into a classic Minnesota road encounter. Fog, a remote road, a glowing cross, a rundown church, and something antlered looking out from a window. Now, this report comes from a witness identified as W, who traveled each year with 5 high school friends to a family cabin in Itasca County, Minnesota. The tradition began after their senior year of high school. The group would drive from Arizona, stop in Denver the first night, then continue the long drive north to the lake. And during the first year of this tradition, the group was on the final stretch of the trip. It was around 1 a.m. They were about an hour from the cabin. It had just rained and the road was extremely foggy. Visibility was poor, with the witnesses able to see only about 10 yards ahead of the van. Now, after 16 hours in the vehicle and very little sleep, they came around a corner and saw something glowing in the distance. It was a giant cross. In that foggy darkness, the glowing cross looked ominous. And as they drove past, they saw a rundown, decrepit church illuminated by this cross. The witness says his friend still denied, but he is certain he saw a light turn on inside the church as they passed. And in the window, he saw a human-like figure with antlers on its head. He says that he was not tired and that the drive had not affected him. The sight frightened him badly, and he wanted to get as far away from the church as possible. But the fog was heavy, and the deer were jumping onto the road every few minutes, so he could not simply speed away. The group eventually made it to the cabin safely. But every time he thinks back to that drive, he gets chills. Now, when people hear antlers in northern woods, some immediately jump to Wendigo. But I'm not sure that's what this was. The Ojibwe people native to the area have traditional lore involving deer women and other spirit figures. Deer women are often associated with warnings, vengeance, or encounters that blur the boundary between human and animal form. The fact that this entity appeared inside a church window makes the case especially strange. Was it a person wearing antlers? A prank? A misidentification shaped by the fog, exhaustion, and headlights? Or was this a genuine glimpse of something that uses familiar structures, churches, windows, roads, and symbols, to appear where it should not? Whatever the witness saw, the scene itself is chilling. A lonely Minnesota road, a glowing cross in the fog, a decrepit church, a light switches on, and an antlered humanoid was watching from the window. Now, at this point, the reports have moved from land spirits and cryptids into something more liminal. Beings that appear at the edge of perception, in the brush, in windows, along roads, and in places where the landscape already feels charged. But this next case turns sharply into a different category. This is no roadside glimpse. This is a childhood encounter inside a tent. It includes paralysis, missing time, a strange being, and the witness waking outside in the cold, wet weeds with no explanation. Now, this report comes from a witness identified as K. The incident occurred during a family reunion at his uncle's cabin near Land O'Lakes State Forest, Minnesota, during the first week of July 1986. There were about 25 family members present, including aunts, uncles, and cousins. It was the first night at the cabin, and the children were sleeping outside in tents. Now, Kay shared a 4-person tent with 2 older brothers and a cousin. The tent was about 150 feet away from the cabin. Now, sometime in the middle of the night, around 2 a.m., Kay woke up. He was lying flat on his back, and he found himself looking directly into the eyes of something standing near his head. The being appeared to have been studying him before he woke. Now, Kay says he can still vividly picture the face. It resembled drawings he had later seen in adulthood. The being had somewhat normal-sized head, though large for its body. It could not have been more than 4 foot tall. Its face was gray-green, wrinkly, with very small nostril holes. The nose was almost flush with its face. But the eyes were the most frightening part. Kay says it was the way the being looked at him, or perhaps he misunderstood its reaction to his terror. The being wore what looked like a collared uniform similar to a trench coat that fell to the ground, with seams along the front. Kay felt that this being was important, possibly a leader or an overseer. The garment was dark fuchsia or purple with dull suede-like texture, and in the moonlight, both the face and the coat seemed to glow. The suit had a tall collar. The entire encounter inside the tent lasted only seconds. Kay remembers being terrified and trying to scream, but nothing came out. His brothers did not wake. Then the being's face seemed to change. It took on a serious expression as if Kay had screamed silently. The being tilted its head back, almost as if scolding him or as if disappointed. The next memory picks up later. Kay was cold and wet. He began waking again, but this time he was no longer inside the tent. He was on the ground in the weeds about 15 foot away. And within seconds of waking outside, he remembered the face that had been staring down at him from inside the tent. Then he screamed. He screamed so violently that his aunt, sleeping in the cabin over 150 foot away, woke up and turned on the lights. Kay saw her silhouette as she investigated. He ran back to the tent. His brothers were scrambling to unzip the door, and when it opened, he pulled him inside and asked what was wrong. Kay told him what he had seen in the tent, but he did not tell him that he had awoken outside. At the time, that detail did not seem like the important part. Now, the next morning, several family members asked who had screamed at 3:30. No one would admit it. Kay's aunt said she had heard it too and looked out the window but couldn't see who it was. That frightened Kay because he thought it should have been obvious. Later, he found his mother and whispered that he had been the one who had screamed. And when she asked why, he said, "I saw an alien." His mother paused nervously and whispered back, "Don't say that to anyone, okay?" Kay believes there was an hour or more of missing time between seeing the being in the tent and waking up outside in the weeds. Now, the questions remain unsolved. How did he get outside the tent? Why was he wet? Why did no one wake when he tried to scream? And why did the encounter seem to begin inside the tent but end outside of it? Was it an abduction? Or was it some other form of contact? This is one of the cases that never leaves the witness. Decades later, the image of the being's face remains vivid. The purple-collared garment and the green skin, the serious expression, the silence, the paralysis, the lost time, and the impossible relocation outside the tent all point to something beyond the child's nightmare. And like many close encounter cases, the most frightening detail may not be the being itself. It may just be that missing hour. Now, the next report also contains a humanoid encounter, missing time, and what the witness interpreted as a life-altering contact event. But this case begins not in a tent, but on a quiet Minnesota road after an evening shift. The figure appears in the headlights, an Owlman. Then a green fire-like orb passed the witness's vehicle. And by the time she reaches home, 2 hours have passed. Now, on September 30th, 2010, in Winnebago, Minnesota, a witness identified as V was driving home from her evening shift at Parker Oates Nursing Home. Winnebago was a quiet town of about 1,200 residents. Autumn leaves were beginning to change, and the night seemed ordinary. Then something massive and otherworldly caught the witness's peripheral vision in the shadow branches of an old tree. Compelled to look, she turned her head. When she snapped her attention back to the road, the figure was suddenly in front of her, illuminated by the headlights. She described it as an Owlman. The being stood about 5 foot tall, with a hauntingly human-like body and enormous owl face. What struck her most were the arms. They were human-like in structure, with forearms and biceps, yet covered in feathers. No hands were visible. The wings appeared attached directly to the human-like arms, forming a continuous structure. The feathers were white on the underbelly and the brown on top, like a regular owl, but the underlying arm structure appeared distinctly human. The feet were owl-like, while the body retained an eerie human quality. But then there were the eyes, large like an owl's, yet unmistakably human in intelligence. The brown depth of those eyes reflected the yellow headlights, not glowing red, but mirror bright and hypnotic. V slammed on the brakes, coming within 4 foot of the being. When she hit the brakes, the creature screeched. She described the sound as both avian and human, primal yet conscious. It spread its wings wide in response, but she said she was not frightened. Instead, the moment felt profoundly weird, as though she had stepped into another reality. Then the encounter shifted. The owlman stared at her with penetrating, reflective eyes, and she felt locked in to an otherworldly communion. Time seemed to suspend. In that silence, she felt rather than heard words. I see you. The witness says she was not afraid. She was frozen in wonder, caught in a trance-like state until something shifted and she became unfrozen. She looked away for only a moment. When she turned back, the owlman had vanished. Now, she glimpsed something impossibly small and swift appearing into the darkness above, moving with a speed that defies physics. Strangely calm, V continued on to Highway 169, maintaining 55 miles an hour toward home. Then another impossibility appeared. A perfect sphere of green fire, about the size of a tennis ball, appeared outside her passenger window. It looked like a living butane flame and kept pace with her vehicle with impossible precision. The orb danced with fluorescent green flames that flickered like liquid light. The more aware she became of it, the more it seemed to respond to her. Eventually, it tapered away and descended toward a distant cow farm. And when V finally reached home, her babysitter was furious. She was 2 hours late. The drive should have taken about 15 minutes. V had no memory of where those missing hours had gone. Now, the next day, she returned to the area where the green orb had descended, searching for burn marks near the cow farm. But she found nothing. No trace, no evidence, nothing left behind. But according to the witness, the strangeness did not end there. Later, she discovered that she was pregnant. Despite circumstances she believed made conception impossible. She says this was followed by a mysterious miscarriage in which the baby vanished completely without medical intervention she expected, leaving doctors unable to provide a satisfying explanation. A decade later, during another extraordinary UFO encounter, V says she met a baby who communicated telepathically that it was the child from that night. The hybrid offspring connected to the impossible pregnancy. Now, to V, the encounter marked the beginning of an awakening. She does not compare this being to a malevolent Cornish owlman of 1976 with glowing red eyes and a sinister presence. She says this Minnesota owlman was different, intelligent, stern, purposeful, and profoundly aware. Its message was simple but powerful. I see you. This report is extraordinary because it does not fit into a single category. It begins as a cryptid-like winged humanoid encounter. It becomes a telepathic contact experience. Then it expands into missing time, a fire-like orb, possibly UFO-related phenomena, pregnancy anomalies, and later contact. Now, for investigators, this is the high strangeness that is most complex. A single encounter that crosses the boundaries among creature sightings, UFO activity, altered consciousness, and the abduction-related phenomena. And once again, Minnesota provides the setting. Now we move from the deeply personal and surreal to a violent high-speed encounter on a roadway. Now, this final case connects directly to the larger mystery of winged humanoids documented throughout the Midwest, including the Chicago area reports. A clear moonlit night, a vehicle traveling south on I-35. A massive winged being drops from the sky, and within seconds, two witnesses believe it's going to smash into their windshield. Now, this report came from a witness identified as DH. Now, DH had come across the Chicago area post about winged humanoids and subsequent reports received in 2017 and 2018. That was the first time he became aware of these sightings, and it prompted him to report his own 2011 experience. Now, DH and a companion were driving south on I-35 after leaving the Black Bear Casino, heading back towards Moose Lake, Minnesota. It was a clear moonlit night around 2 a.m. DH was driving a sports car. And as he drove, he saw a large winged being quickly descending from the sky in front of them. Now, at first, they saw it drop straight down with wings horizontal and open. DH estimated it was at least a mile away and possibly at an altitude between 2,000 and 3,000 feet. It looked like a human with wide bat-like wings. The wingspan appeared to stretch across both freeway lanes. The being glided towards the car as if it was going to collide with the windshield. DH's companion recoiled, expecting impact. DH himself braced for a collision. But at the last moment, the winged being suddenly passed over the vehicle. Both occupants were so shaken that DH pulled over onto the shoulder. Now, DH described the being as dark brown in color with a shiny, wet-like appearance. The wings were leather-like and large. The body was 5 to 6 foot long and thin, with a narrow head and pointed ears. The eyes appeared hollow and dark. The being never flapped its wings. It did not move them in any normal way. It just seemed to have some other means of propulsion. The day after the account was posted, DH provided a more detailed update. He said both he and his companions saw what looked like a wide, glossy object drop straight down extremely fast, like a spider dropping on a vertical web line. It stopped suddenly just feet away from the horizon, then instantly began gliding over the vehicle. DH estimated that the vehicle and the creature were moving toward one another at a combined speed of around 140 miles an hour. He saw it in the high beams as it headed directly toward the windshield. He waited until collision seemed imminent. At about 20 foot away, he ducked sideways while trying to maintain control of the car. His view of the wings, face, and shoulders were brief but unforgettable. His lower body went numb. He experienced goosebumps throughout his lower torso in a way he had never felt before. He said the creature defied physics. It dropped straight down, not on an angled glide. It appeared to fall faster than gravity would allow, then abruptly transitioned into a forward movement. Its bat-like wings nearly spanned 2 freeway lanes. To DH and his companion, it just made no sense. And still makes no sense now. Now, DH is a friend, a respected professional in the entertainment industry. His reports is consistent with other inquiries about winged humanoids received over the years. What stands out in the movement is the movement. The being did not behave like a large bird. It did not flap. It did not glide gradually. It dropped vertically, stopped, then moved toward the vehicle at a high speed before passing overhead. That motion has been reported in other winged humanoid cases: sudden drops, impossible turns, silent flight, unnatural acceleration, and apparent control beyond normal aerodynamics. Minnesota now joins the larger Midwestern map of winged humanoid encounters: Chicago, Illinois, Wisconsin, Indiana, Pennsylvania, and here on I-35 near Moose Lake, Minnesota. Now, the reports from Minnesota form a pattern that it's difficult to ignore. A 12-foot living tree walking through the marshes of St. Louis County. Generations of upright canids haunt a northern property. A Bigfoot breaching a reinforced grow shed near Kettle River. A hollow human-shaped outline moving through the winter trail in Maplewood. An antlered humanoid staring from a church window in Itasca County. A gray-green alien being standing inside a child's tent near Land O'Lakes State Forest. An Owlman in Winnebago, followed by a green fire orb, missing time and lifelong contact experiences. And a bat-winged humanoid descending over I-35 near Black Bear Casino in Moose Lake. These accounts do not belong in one category. They cross boundaries. Cryptid, spirit, alien, interdimensional, winged humanoids, cloaked entities, land-based protector, predator, watcher. But they all share one thing: witnesses who were forced to confront something that did not belong in ordinary reality. Minnesota's terrain may be part of the answer. The lakes, forests, wetlands, reservations, old roads, isolated cabins, and northern corridors create an environment where the veil seems just too thin. Some of these beings appear tied to the land. Others appear to pass through it. Some observing from the trees, some move through the brush. Some enter homes, tents, and dreams. Some descend from the sky. What's happening in Minnesota? Are these ancient presences that have always been there? Are they cryptid populations using remote wilderness to remain hidden? Are some of these entities connected to UFO and contact phenomena? Or are we seeing different masks worn by the same underlying intelligences? As always, the witnesses are left with questions, but one thing is certain. Minnesota is far stranger than most people imagine. And in the deep woods, along the fog-covered roads near the lakes, marshes, and lonely highways, something is still being seen. Something is still watching. And sometimes it allows itself to be seen. This has been Unexplained Minnesota. Now, please subscribe to Phantoms and Monsters Radio, activate notifications, and share these presentations with others interested in the unexplained. If you have experienced something unexplained in Minnesota or elsewhere, I encourage you to document every detail you remember. Even details that initially seem insignificant may become important when compared with other reports. And you can submit your account directly to Phantoms and Monsters. Witness confidentiality and anonymity will be respected when requested. Your support helps us continue documenting witness testimony, investigating unusual incidents, and preserving these accounts for future research. So let's start the Q&A, and please type your questions in all caps, please. Paranormalism Net, have there been cryptid sightings or anomalous activity in the area of Ash River, Minnesota? I mean, in particular, I don't know. It could have been. I'd had to look at it specifically, but right now I had no idea. Paranormalism Net. I'm interested in this area because Fermilab has a facility there that's been on the receiving end of nova neutrino beam experiments. Yeah, I'll look. Chicago's got a Fermilab outside in Cook County as well. So outside of it in Cook County, in fact, it's got the largest, not the largest, the earliest particle accelerator in the world. So it's been there quite a while. Boobly TSS. What is the most reported cryptid from Minnesota besides Wendigo? Well, it's not Wendigo. It's Bigfoot. Bigfoot is overwhelming sighting reports. But as time has gone on, we're getting more and more. I mean, the cryptid canine sightings, the winged humanoid sightings, and others are becoming more prevalent. Michelle, do you think that some of the werewolf beings could possibly be shifters and live amongst them in human form and in wolf form, and that's why they are so in tune and comfortable into their routines? Possibly. I think a lot of these beings are ultra-terrestrials. They do have locations where they live and hide while they're on our plane, I believe. But they're not here for a long period of time. I mean, it does seem that they do move in and out between our reality and their dimension or wherever they come from. It does seem that they do adapt to locations and to people very well. But in some cases, it gets a little hairy and things happen. But I think as time has gone on, they do become more and more attuned to what's going on around them on our plane. Dagnammit, the Lake Pepin monster is a similar cryptid in Loch Ness to the Loch Ness monster. Yeah, I mean, it is somewhat similar. Now, there are people that have all kinds of theories about the Loch Ness monster, and the Lake Pepin monster falls into that category as well. There are actually individuals who believe Loch Ness monster is actually an interdimensional being. Now, I don't know about that. I don't know. And honestly, I really don't know what to make of that whole phenomena. There's something there that we just don't understand. I think I'm not doubting that it's there, but then again, I just can't really focus in as to what it may actually be. Lala Bright, if you could go back and reinvestigate one case with today's technology, which one would you choose? My winged humanoid encounter in 1988. I'd like to find out more what was going on back then, and to compare it to some of the other sightings I've received since then, particularly in South Central Pennsylvania, and then its relationship to what people are seeing in Chicago, because it's very similar. Same type of body structure, same type of abilities to move without flapping wings. Many with the red eyes, and just other similarities that seem to pop up occasionally. And the one thing that still fascinates me with the Chicago sightings is that most of the sightings are witnessed by Hispanic people with Hispanic heritage, and that continues to happen. Howie Staring, Lon, have you been back to the river you had your first encounter? That river, was it? Do you still fish? No, I haven't been back there. I really haven't. I know it's all, from what I understand, it's all built up now. Most of that area is built up with houses, so I don't know how much is actually there. But no, I never went back. I never really investigated the area. I didn't really didn't want to disturb what I believe I saw that day. Now, again, I had a dream about 2 weeks ago after watching Disclosure Day, when they made the mention of Sykesville in that movie, and it took me right back to it. And I had a dream that night. I never remember dreams of that, my encounter with that Bigfoot, and then a alien gray literally stepping out from behind it and standing beside it. I mean, I was stunned, and I woke up immediately. I don't know if there's something there or not. I don't know if it's a relationship, but it's got me thinking. I mean, what was this encounter I have? Is it involved with some type of alien intelligence? Why did Spielberg use the town Sykesville? There's a lot of synchronicities in that film that people have outlined and have mentioned. And for those who have seen it, I'd like for you to contact me and let me know how you felt when you saw it, especially if you're an experiencer. And as well, I'd like to know what others around you and people you know who have seen it, how they reacted, especially experiencers. Again, I saw the film with two experiencers, and I'm an experiencer. And our reactions were profound. Channel 0X, which do you consider to be the most likely cryptid to exist? I think all of them exist, but I don't think they exist in places on this earth continuously. Now, again, I do believe Bigfoot. There are Bigfoot groups that do live in areas of, especially in the United States and in the Pacific Northwest of Canada, around the Gulf Coast, down in Florida. I think there are family groups. I think there are actual living groups there that habitat is theirs. But I think for the most part, these creatures we call Sasquatch and Bigfoot are most likely ultra-terrestrial beings, and they're not here all the time. And I think that pertains to other sightings around the world. Now, you talk about the Heron, the Yeti, and others in Asia. Could they also be ultra-terrestrial, or are they indigenous? It's hard to tell. Do you think Michelle, do you think the missing time incidents are actually just hitting vortexes or portals and being thrown out to the other side back in the original timeline? And that's possible. That's possible. I have, I've heard people give that explanation and have theorized that. Again, I don't know. The whole portal gateway thing is, for the most part, it's all speculation. It's all conjecture. But it's coming to a time where people who do the investigations of these creatures or anything involved with the paranormal that may seem to be something that kind of moves within dimensions, people got to start keeping a more open mind about this and start realizing that, there's an explanation of this, but we just don't have it yet. And we better start opening the books up, keeping an open mind, and start realizing that maybe something other than what we believe is actually going on. Michelle, do you think the wolf clans in different regions where they have been sighted are related to, or do they think they are separate but interact and share knowledge of how to avoid or to interact with humans? I don't know. I wish I knew that. Again, I think they do in some cases interact. Of course, we're not getting every encounter reported to us, but I think it very well could be. And hopefully as time goes on, some people will start coming forward with more direct knowledge of what they had experienced or seen that may put some light onto what people are talking about. I hope it happens. Layla Bright, if you could lay every Dogman, Bigfoot, and winged humanoid sighting on a single map, which pattern do you think would surprise people the most? The amount of sightings. I do think the number of sightings and the places where they're sighted. I mean, if you put every sighting that's reported in the United States and Canada, most of the United States and most of the southern part of Canada would be covered. Lala Brighty, if you had to choose between finding a body or understanding the pattern behind the encounters, which would advance the field more? I think the body would probably be a panacea. But of course, knowledge is also important, and people who go out and keep records of what they're observing, that's important too. But of course, obtaining a body through natural means other than killing something would be ideal, in my opinion. Okay, folks. Well, I want to thank you for coming in here this evening. And until next time, just remain observant, trust your instincts, and remember that the world around us may be far stranger than we have been led to believe. So have a nice evening. Have a great weekend. See you next Friday. Good night.